HIV/AIDS awareness discussions by health personnel is hoping to continue Niue's negative status in the World Health Chart, as Niue remains one of the Pacific Islands not to have a case of HIV/AIDS on the island. One of the public health specialists from SBC, Alan Garvey, said the impact of health personnel training should be a benefit to Niue.
We are introducing a laboratory test where in Niue you can confirm a reactive test for HIV in country. Whereas before you have to send the specimen overseas, it takes about 1 or 2 weeks before you get a confirmatory result. Whereas in Niue now you can actually confirm HIV test result in a day. These are some of the benefits about HIV testing. Also, drugs are given for free if you have any patient who is positive for HIV also, that is also given to them. And also, it is routinely offered HIV testing for pregnant women who come to the clinic. So once they test positive, drugs are given so that the baby can be protected from acquiring HIV from a HIV positive mother also.
Mr. Garvey said there are positive impacts with having the available service for HIV/AIDS detection on the island, but whole communities also need to gain support.
I think the healthcare workers have they have knowledge about HIV. It's just a matter of reinforcing that one, reassuring them. And we also have a discussion with the NGOs yesterday from the Women's Council as well as from the faith-based organizations. And one of the things that we have told them that there is now a testing service in Niue, and what if one person comes out positive? Is Niue ready for that one? And we need to have support from the Women's Council, other non-governmental organizations, as well faith-based organizations. And our response was very positive. Yeah.
Now, as you said, I guess having this service available here on the island is a benefit for obviously personnel. I mean, the health sector.
Yes.
But in regards also, like you said, are we ready for it? Or
Yes.
is Niue ready for it? And you get positive feedback.
Yeah.
But what about the stigma? Because, this is one of the biggest challenges that we have as a small community.
Yes. That's why we are actually mobilizing the other social support in the community so that at least they are aware, so that even though we might be focusing on healthcare, but HIV also has a social component in it. So we are tapping on those organizations which can provide social support. And for a small community, I know they won't be forsaken at all. Initially the reaction might be, of course, that is understandable. But in the end, our discussion is, they are very compassionate about it. And also the spiritual support that they can provide for the patients also. Yeah.
And lastly, for those who are viewing, who are looking and watching this program tonight on the news, how confident should they be in approaching the department and asking to be tested? Because it's obviously volunteer.
Yes. Yeah. First and foremost, we have qualified counselors now in Niue. You have 2 qualified counselors. They have diploma in counseling, and that is a plus factor in a very small island country like yours. So they're qualified counselors. They can provide you with risk assessment, whether the chances of acquiring HIV or transmitting HIV to anyone. But we have to focus on sexually transmitted infection, which is more common in the community. And HIV is also a sexually transmitted infection, and the risk factors are there. So if you come for a sexually transmitted infection screen, we also screen you for HIV. And in terms of confidentiality, although there will be issues in it, but as trained healthcare workers, although we encourage confidentiality, but it takes time for a while. It needs practice also for our healthcare workers, and we have to reassure the public that confidentiality or security of information or the privacy of the patient will be there.
Mr. Garvis is on the island with a team of 3 to train health personnel as well as civil society and NGOs. They will leave the island tomorrow morning. Dengue fever is on the increase with over 60 confirmed cases by the hospital, finding it difficult to determine with the increase of influenza. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Eddie Akawala says they have lost count of the number of dengue cases, especially with those presenting at the hospital with flu-like symptoms. The outbreak has now spread to the outer villages, according to the hospital. That is inevitable because wherever there are mosquitoes, there are potentials of a dengue. The hospital also has set criteria for those who are admitted due to limited beds. Health officials continue to urge the public to continue with mosquito control by destroying breeding places to reduce the numbers and likelihood of further spreading dengue. Dr. Akawala says for those who present with minor dengue symptoms, they can be treated at the hospital, but are then referred to return home and stay hydrated while they recover. There is only one strain of dengue on the island, that is dengue 1, but the hospital now have extra work on their hands with influenza now here. Dr. Eddie Akawala says the main concern at the moment is the flu. Today, Samoa Islands are celebrating their 50th year of independence, with many dignitaries from the Pacific who made a special trip to the independent state to acknowledge Samoa's Golden Jubilee. Samoa was the first South Pacific island to gain independence. Niue's Premier Honourable Toke Talangi also travelled to Samoa this week as a show of support for our close neighbour. Samoa, who first became independent in 1962, has made substantial changes to its constitutional rights, including changing the date line in parallel with New Zealand, as well as changing the road requirements to driving on the left-hand side. Most other countries in the Pacific has also made comments on the positive impact the islands have changed the dynamics of economical benefits for its people and the Pacific. The first 4 Pacific countries to gain independence was Samoa in 1962, Nauru 1968, Tonga 1970, and so did Fiji in 1970. The celebrations today is held at Parliament grounds in Mulinu, Apia, and the Central Government House before closing next Tuesday. Niue High School held their annual English speech competition yesterday, despite some controversy over the disqualification of a speech by a Year 11 student. Even though not many turned up for the speech competition, it was refreshing to hear many of the ideas that created some of the presentations by students from Year 10 to 12. The theme of the day, Speak Up a Rich Talk Outside My Comfort Zone. Many of the students spoke of role models from afar, and some speak of their own experiences, while others act out scripts from books they read. But as all participants know, there can only be a few winners. Year 10 students' competition was taken out by Isabella Funiu, second placing went to Manu Hipa, and third placing to BN Chapman. Whilst Year 10 top 3 spots were taken out by all girls, a mix of Year 11 students saw Yoteva Pasisi taking out top honours in their category, second placing to Phoebe Singh, and third place to Hakitoa Mautama. The last category for the day belonged to the Year 12 students, whose results started with third placing going to Francois Tukuitonga, second place to Nina Nemaia. The top placing for Year 12 was taken out by Tamara Mautama. Acknowledgements to the teachers and students of Niue High School for another year of English speech competition. The second round of touch rugby trials on the island is now being called again by the Touch Rugby Association. 14 young men and 7 young ladies have been called for the trials to join the rest of the team from overseas in representing Niue at the Spin tournament, confirmed to be held here on the island in October. While most of the team selected from experienced players from New Zealand and Australia, it is expected that approximately 4 to 6 players will be selected from the local trials. The Spin tournament will run during the Constitution celebrations, and it's expected 5 to 7 countries will arrive on the island to compete. The women's klikiki season may drag on a little bit longer than first anticipated with the postponement of games. The season was originally meant to be held from April to June. The Women's Kilikiki Committee yesterday decided to postpone all games this weekend out of respect and in light of a pending funeral. Last week, 4 teams postponed their games due to community commitments. With the dramatic developments throughout the season and the string of show days ahead, the interest is wearing and the finals may not be until July. The next round of games will be held on the 16th of June. And to end our news bulletin, a charter flight from the Cook Islands made a pit stop here on the island today as the passengers made their journey to Samoa. The 12-seater flight made a short stop at Hainan Airport before departing for the celebrations in Apia. Niue used to have a flight service from the Cook Islands many years ago, but it discontinued. That's our news bulletin for tonight. Good evening.